professor and chair of the Department of Sociology and Criminology. He's a distinguished professor at the University of Miami, and definitely a fellow Terp. So with much to, we would love to be able to hear from him, and welcome for Dr. Piquero.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, everybody. I'll just say a couple few remarks, not many, because this is much better for Q&A. When I accepted this invitation, it was an honor because I'm a Terp, three-time Terp. My wife's a three-time Terp, got married on campus, grew up right across the street from campus for a good part of my life, and have huge affinity for the institution. I wear two hats. Yeah, that's right. I love that. I wear two hats. I've been an academic for 26 years, and I'm right now on public service leave from the University of Miami because in June of 2022, President Joe Biden appointed me to be the director of the Bureau of Justice Statistics, which is one of 13 federal statistical agencies. You all might be familiar with the Census Bureau, Bureau of Labor Statistics. I'm in charge of all of the nation's crime data. So that's good or bad, depending upon what day of the week it is, and who wants to be upset at me, but that's okay. And so, when you get a phone call from the White House and it says, would you be interested in serving for the president? I thought, yes. Okay. Didn't take long for that answer to come out, because politics aside, you're serving the office, and I'm leading a statistical agency. And so for someone like me who grew up as a child of Cuban immigrants who came to this country in their teens in the early 60s with nothing, they left the country because that's how you left the country in the early 60s. They came over as teenage political refugees. And I grew up in DC, and, every way imaginable, I shouldn't be in the position I'm in my life. I mean, it's just every possible thing that would goes against the immigrant coming to America family story and success. It's an extreme privilege and honor to have succeeded the way I have, but none of that would have been possible had it not been for the sacrifices of my parents, my grandparents, the education I received throughout my entire life, not just obviously at the University of Maryland, but all the people who invested in me, and of course my wife, who puts up with me and gives me the ability and flexibility to do this. So, that's it. I could talk, I'm an academic, so I could talk about me for like an hour, but I don't want to do that. I do, but no, I don't want to. I'd rather just, set it up for you all to ask me any kinds of questions you want. I'm happy to do as much as I can to offer the things that have gotten me to where I'm at, things that work, things that didn't work, and anything in between. So shoot.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing with us the brief bio from you. I'm sure that we could spend hours and hours and hours discussing your experience and your background. And as you mentioned, already you have a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD from university, as well as your wife. So there's a lot of Terps hanging around probably in your house. And we're so happy that you're joining us. So this is one of a kind of opportunity for us to learn about your background and to learn what took you through that career path, the criminology and criminal justice. And it's an honor for us to learn from you, because we not always have such a special guest in this type of event, and we're so honored that we're going to be able to hear and learn from you and get some insights about your career path. Mm-hmm. So we would like to ask by asking you what propelled you to this trifecta to go through the bachelor's, master's, and PhD program at UMD and pursue and achieve
complete serendipity. Literally complete serendipity. Growing up as a kid, my dad was on his way to being a professional baseball player in Cuba. So I grew up in a baseball household here in the States. And, I wanted to be a baseball player. So I went to a minor league tryout camp and met a bunch of kids who were much better than I was. So there went my dreams. But at the same time, I was playing in a band. I signed up to be a radio, television, film major at the University of Maryland. So this is fall of 1988. Was my first semester on campus. And, it was fine. I did what every 18-year-old kid did, which is not thought I could get by with what I did in high school. And then realized, oh, that's probably not the best strategy to take. And in the spring semester of my first year, back then in drop ad, we had to wait in line. There was no computers, so waited in line because one of my classes didn't make. I'm sure everybody on this call has had this happen once in their lives. So I was waiting in line, and you waited in line, you literally get up to it was in the Armory, and you literally get up to the front desk and they had this book. And you go, okay, well, what's available. And I wanted only a class after 11 o'clock on Tuesday, Thursday, priorities. And the only thing that was available was Introduction to Criminal Justice. I'm like, perfect, sign me up. So took first day of class, first week of class, the teacher who still is an instructor there, went to my website, Lori Brooks. She was an amazing teacher, but she made the topic come alive. And so I switched my major in my first year. And then about a year and a half later, she said, hey, Alex, do you want to work on a research project with me? And we surveyed officers in Baltimore and in PG County about stress and their workload and that kind of stuff. And we presented that paper at a conference. Actually, it was published in a journal article before I graduated. And in my junior year, the person who eventually became my mentor, who passed away a few years ago at Maryland, he said, you should go to grad school. And I said, what's grad school? My parents didn't finish college. They didn't go to college. And so I went home and I told my dad, because I was living at home. And my dad said, well, how much is it going to cost? So my mentor said, well, you can apply for these assistantships if you're competitive. And so my first semester, I didn't get one because my grades weren't really great. But I was able to get on a grant with a faculty member, and then my life changed. And so one class, the serendipity of one class, one professor who changed my life trajectory. And now myself, looking back 26 years as an academic and now working for the President of the United States, I think about all of the people who I've mentored, over 20 some odd PhD students, hundreds of I've taught thousands of students. And then you get this email out of nowhere. It says, I'll never forget that class. You were the most important instructor. You changed my life. You can't put a price on that. And I was able to experience that myself, but I'm sure Dr. Brooks experienced that when, all the students that she's taught. So I got into criminology because a class was open. That was it. Otherwise, who knows what my life would have turned out like. I would have been some other kind of major. I won't poo-poo any kind of majors because I'm sure I'll offend someone in the audience, but that's how it happened.
Great. Yeah, I mean, sometimes things happen and you just take a path. So were there any other inspirations throughout your life that push you, and especially to keep achieving? Because once you reach a level, then you said, okay, I'm done, I'm going to go to work. But you kept on going and going through your professional education development. What things guided you, or any inspirations throughout your life?
So that's a great question. And tomorrow's a day to be better than today. And my mom and dad always taught me education, education, education. Always surround yourself by people who are better, whether it's in athletics or in smartness or whatever, because that's how you get better. You never finish the work. The way I describe it in terms of whether I've testified on Capitol Hill and I've worked with international governments. And for me is, when I talk about these crime matters or policy matters, for me, it's think about a jigsaw puzzle, right? I love doing crossword puzzles. And so a jigsaw puzzle has 1,000 pieces. And the first thing you do is you build the border, because it's the easiest thing to do, because the borders have a straight line. But everything we're doing, whether it's in criminology or economics or whatever field we're in, whether it's in academia or research or nonprofits or whatever, we're filling in a part of the jigsaw puzzle. And so for me, I'm filling in this part of the puzzle, someone else is filling that part of the puzzle, and we're always kind of developing new ways of thinking about solving puzzles. So for me, I'm always reading and always learning, and I always like to be surrounded by people who are challenging me. It would be boring otherwise. So I love learning, and that's why for me, there's no stopping or hitting a plateau, winning awards or whatever that is. Those are secondary things. That means you're doing your job. That means you're doing your job really well. But that doesn't mean the job is done. So yeah, Um,
Is it my connection?
I'm also,
I think his connection might have dropped off a bit, so we'll work to get him on in a second.
inspiration, because they always told me, education, and, never make excuses. They never made excuses. And so the way my brother and I were brought up is you work hard, you work harder, and you work even harder because there's always someone working harder than you. So I don't know any other mindset. They've been the inspiration for me. Other people inspire me in different ways.
Yeah.
My mentors might inspire me. My wife inspires me. My colleagues inspire me. You draw different bits of inspiration from different people in different kinds of ways. But I'm just inspired by what's around me. I mean, I read multiple newspapers a day. And I always, get inspiration from hearing people's stories or reading opinion pieces, whether I agree with them or not. It's kind of always almost secondary to those kinds of things.
Okay, great, thank you. And do you think are there any skills that you think you develop that help you or contribute to achieve all of our professional career? Or what would you tell our audience that you think are the most important things that they should develop or consider?
Never stop learning. There's always something to read. There's always a class to take. There's always a skill set you need. I was fortunate to grow up, obviously in a Cuban household. So I know the Cuban version of Spanish. So for the Spanish people in the room, you know what I'm talking about. And I was fortunate to have that language. And then I subsequently learned, to be somewhat conversant in other languages, because there's always something to do. I mean, why wouldn't you learn something like a language? It costs you nothing. You can do it on your own. And if anything, it's just for your own, growth. So for me, I would tell everybody, whatever it is you're doing, whether it's for your job or not, always learn. You can read, I read religiously stuff all the time. But that's a passion for me. Some people just kind of like to sit in front of a television, which is okay sometimes, we all do that. But it's hard for me to turn off the mind. I mean, really, this is difficult for me because I'm always thinking about, oh, well, I could do that, or I just have this idea. And, when you love what you do, it's not work. And I've never worked a day in my life. I mean, even now, working for the president, it's not work. It's a joy to get to do when you love what you get to do. It's a privilege to do that every day of your life. Knowing what my mom and dad went through in their lives to give me the ability to be in the position that I eventually came.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm going to share a little bit more about your background. Dr. Piquero, you're a fellow of the American Society of Criminology and the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences. You've published over 475 peer-reviewed research articles, and you also served as editor of the Journal of Quantitative Criminology and the Justice Evaluation Journal. Your work has been cited over 50,000 times. And in 2019, you were included among the top 100,000 most cited scientists in the world. Can you please speak about the importance of research and offer any tips or lessons learned for seeking and getting research published, especially when there are sometimes barriers in the Latin community of the researcher space?
It's hard. Publishing is hard. Doing research is hard. If it was easy, everybody would do it. I mean, I tell everybody, look, I start with the same blank white word screen everybody else did and does. And so you gotta, writing and doing research, regardless of the field, it's a craft. I mean, I write and rewrite and write and rewrite and write and rewrite, and I share it with people, because I'm trying to reach different audiences with my work. There's no shortcuts in this business. There are no shortcuts, and there shouldn't be shortcuts to get to success in any kind of life. So I developed a network that I developed. That it didn't come to me. I never had Hispanic teachers in high school. grade school, college. And I never saw that to me as a barrier because my mom and dad said, you learn from who you learn. And that's the way it is. When I got into my career, I helped start programs that were designed to help minority youth. And to me, it wasn't just focused on Hispanics or, African-American kids or Asian kids. It was everybody. So we started programming, and it was interesting because several of us in criminology, we played in a rock band, and we would play at our annual conference, and we would have a dance. And all of these people I read in grad school, like these older people, they're like, they're out, have a few drinks, and they're like, come dancing all night long. It's great. But we charged admission, and we used that money to create fellowships for minority graduate students to go to grad school. There were none in one of our professional associations. And now I think there are 6 to 10 a year, and we helped seed that. So it's always been important for me to do that. And anytime I get asked to do anything for any group, I've gone to HBCUs, I've gone to Morehouse, Spelman, UTEP. I'll go anywhere to talk about my life and what I was able to do and what I still want to do. So I think those things are really, really important.
Yeah, well, mentorship is definitely something that
Absolutely.
That is very valued, and we know that you've done that a lot. So I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people that you have also inspired and like driven them through their career path as well. Can you please share with us a bit about the importance of active membership in professional affiliations, how that contributed in your career?
Look, people are not going to always open doors for you. That's the world. And we can say that's terrible, but that's, there's some things where we'll be able to move the needle on in our lifetime and some things that we won't. So you can complain about it, which is not really helpful, or you can do it yourself and you do it. So I just wanted to introduce myself. And I got to meet people that way, and they remember me. Our field of criminology is very, very small. And so I made it a point to develop my own networks because I didn't want to live in a world to have to rely on other people. And again, that's my mom and my dad. They always said, don't rely on anybody else, rely on you and your family. And it was over and over and over again. So my mentor, Ray Paternoster at Maryland, was really good. He wasn't the rah guy. Let me introduce you to all my friends and blah. That just wasn't his style. And it wasn't like he wasn't like that with anybody. I would introduce me to a couple people. He helped me work on research. He taught me research. So there's different kinds of mentoring, right? There's a mentor who introduces you to everybody in the world. There's a mentor who helps you at conferences. I drew experiences from all of those kinds of mentors, and I've tried to do the same thing for my students. Even people who aren't my students email me and ask me for advice. And I tell them, this is what I would think, but and I always tell them very carefully, I'm one person. Your job is to reach a lot of different people and grow your network. And when you start to succeed, you're going to have more people coming to you. And that's how a network creates itself. So there's got to be some human agency in this process. People have to get in there and do the hard work, demonstrate that they're capable, and things will happen to them. There's no substitute for hard work. This is not happening. Nor should there be.
Great. Thank you, Lydia. So we're going to switch to myself asking questions. I'm learning so much. I just wanted to share that.
Great.
Just your energy is definitely like so helpful.
If she was in person, it would be so much more fun.
I know, I can imagine. So part of what we wanted to do is to ensure, because us alumni, Latino alumni, Latinx alumni, so we go from bachelor's, master's, and PhDs. I myself hold a master's degree, and I'm thinking of doing a PhD right now, right? So we wanted to make sure that we asked you questions in all those facets, right, of academia, and then the big part, which is working for the federal government, a career in the federal government. So that's the part that I'm going to focus on. So one of the things that you mentioned was that, you started research in the undergrad, and then one of the things you said is never stop learning. And then, taking research to the academia level, which would be in the PhD process, and then the next levels of even service through statistics in the federal government. In terms of the research, can you speak a little bit more of the importance of that getting published? You mentioned it's hard, it's a craft to do it, build your own networks. How any other importance or tips that you can provide for those who are thinking of pursuing research in the PhD world, I guess?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I mean, I started, you learn the craft of research, and you learn the craft of writing and publishing. And, I fortunately, Dr. Brooks took me under her wing and said, we're going to write an article. And I'm like, well, how do you write an article? And so, you're used to writing 12-page papers, right, for class. And so she taught me the different sections. And so the more I read journal articles, the more I understood how to craft sections. And then you're basically trying to tell a story. Field, it's 3 pages and it's bing, bang, boom. In the social sciences, you have to review when the dinosaurs started, because that's what the social sciences like to do. So there is a lot. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I would write and rewrite paragraphs, write and rewrite paragraphs, write and rewrite paragraphs. And I would share my work with other people. That was really always helpful for me, because I didn't know how they would interpret the work I did or the writing I did. So that was a really useful thing for me. And that's, and I'm still getting better. I my writing early in my career, and I think about it does become a craft. And something I do every day is I write for 10 or 15 minutes a day. And if you don't have 10 or 15 minutes for your craft, then you're not caring about your craft. Everybody has 10 minutes in a day. You're just choosing how to use those 10 minutes. And writing is like a muscle. You have to flex it. You have to do the weights. You have to do this over and over again. So it's a lot of practice. And that's always been, it's hard sometimes. I mean, there's some days you look at a computer and you're just staring at it and going, I don't know what the hell I'm going to write down today. So you try to figure out what part of that paper or research study you can work on, even if it's a sentence, even if it's, you've did an analysis and you're going to write up the results of that table. You're succeeding by writing that sentence. And so I never not succeed in that day, because I was able to do something. And I'm that way still now. I still publish my academic work, even as I work with for the president. But I have to just obviously publish on the University of Miami, and I have a disclaimer, but I'm still doing my research and mentoring students as much as I can, not as much as I miss that. But practice.
Wonderful.
And remember, a PhD doesn't mean you have to go to academia. A PhD just opens a bunch of doors.
That's good. That's actually really helpful. So I'm very passionate about public service, and I think some of us are also, right? And you have mentioned you're being able to service through statistics, something that it's your craft and something that you love what you do, what you get to do. And that's something very interesting for me in terms of what I'm hearing, in terms of really having that love within the federal government agency and the bureaucracy that comes into that. Can you tell us a little bit more how that started, the being able to work in federal government, how you're pivoted on that, like just basically what you just said, PhD doesn't mean academia. It opens up doors.
Yeah, it was complete serendipity. I'll tell you the whole story. I'll be completely honest. I never in my life thought I would work in the federal government. I've been in academia for 26 years, and I love teaching. I love doing research. I love walking around campus. I mean, Maryland's gorgeous, right? Miami is a gorgeous campus. You love the environment. People are always young and wanting to learn and stuff. That's very exciting. during February of 2022, we're still in a virtual world, most of us. I did a presentation on my work on domestic violence during COVID. And it was covered in the New York Times. And anything, whether or not you like the Times or not, doesn't really matter. If it's in the Times, people pay attention. So I got asked to give a presentation to a bunch of people. I mean, there's like 150 boxes on the screen. Like, and everybody's got their video off because that's what everybody does during these calls, which is fine. And at the end of that call, I got this email from a person who I met once, said, "Hey, do you have time to have a conversation at 5:30 tonight?" I'm like, "Sure, I'll talk to anybody." And so my wife, Nikki, and I are walking our puppy around the lake. The University of Miami has a beautiful lake. If anybody's been to the university, it's absolutely gorgeous. So we walk the puppy around the lake, and walking around the lake and get the call. And the call says, "We watched your presentation today, and you've accomplished so much, yada, yada, yada. The president of the United States would want to know if you'd be interested in serving blah." And it took me, yes, right? So this is like, of course I'll serve the president of the United States, right? And then I'm like, this is the federal government. I've never been in the federal government. I've only been in academia, where you can kind of not do what you want, but a lot easy to do. You kind of control everything in academia. And the federal government, the job controls you. Because being a director of a statistical agency, it doesn't stop. I mean, it literally does not stop. I mean, you have reports that you have to do by a certain deadline. You have to be responsive to Congress. You have to be responsive to academics. You have to be responsive to anybody who wants you. And so the amount of incoming and work is something I've never experienced in my entire life, ever. And it's hard to explain that to someone if they've not been in that position. It's different. It's not just the federal government. It's a leadership position for the president of the United States in the federal government. So it's much different. But it's the biggest honor one could ever have to have the president of the United States do that. So, for example, it becomes official when the president signs what's called a commission. Basically, think about a diploma that the president of the University of Maryland or the Board of Regents signs, right? So I have in my office in DC a commission that's signed by the president of the United States appointing me as a director. I look at that and I go, wow, it's wow. So I don't think about it as the federal government. The bureaucracy reminds me that it is. And that's, for those of you who are thinking about going into the government, that's a reality of the situation. Academia is bureaucratic. I thought it was, but it's much less bureaucratic now. And so things take time. And Alex doesn't always move very slowly. And so Alex expects the world to move as fast as Alex does. And my wife is really kind enough to remind me every day, no, chill out. She's learning, she knows some Cuban words, calmate, which is a great one. My grandmother used to say that to me all the time. So, it's been interesting because I'm learning something entirely new being in the federal government. And so that's kind of fun. Today I had a long conversation with the director of the census. I never would have had access to the director of the census as an academic. I just pick up the phone and call the director of the census. So that was kind of cool. And then you're in these high level meetings when you're doing stuff, but the world won't see it for a year or two. Like, and everybody go, Alex, you're not doing anything in your position. I'm like, well, I am, but you just won't see it for a while. And so knowing that stuff has happened and is happening, and it's going to benefit these people, academics, researchers, policymakers, my mom and dad, for all, that's going to be really cool. So that's what it's been like for 5.5 months.
That's amazing. It's funny because Lee and I, just before this call, we were talking and we were like, oh, you know what, we really need to, we're so close, we both live in the DC area, we're so close to the census, we should really reach out to them, because we were sitting there thinking, talking about numbers of Hispanics and Latinos in the area. So
Rob Santos, the director of the census, and he's Hispanic, he's a San Antonio kid. He would if he's not a Maryland alumni, so there's that. But he's the director of the census. He's fantastic. And one thing that's really important to me, to talk about this for a second, is I've made it a real big priority that in our research products, that to the extent we can, we disaggregate our analysis across race and ethnicity. And it's not easy to do that because not every data collection system in the world captures that. You know, and we could talk for hours about how we code all of this stuff, right? It's a debate that hopefully will get solved one day. You know, but at least we can control that to the extent we have those data and break that down, because it's important. And we're doing that stuff as well with gender identity. We were one of the leading statistical agencies to parse out data on gender identity to the extent that people want to report what the gender identity. All you can do is ask, and you hope people are willing to respond to the questions you give them. So we're trying to lead the nation with respect to asking those questions and presenting those data. So those are some interesting opportunities that I get to be flexible with as a director of a statistical agency. I'm governed by what are called statistical directives that not every other agency is. So I do get some leeway, some.
That's great, because you're also setting the path also for those behind you in these new, more inclusionary methods, right?
Yeah, then that's the goal. That's the goal.
Yeah, and honestly, thank you for that serendipity, right? Like, I mean, thank this universe for that, because we have people like you in there now. One of the parts that I wanted to ask, and I'm summarizing, so because we want to get into the questions, is this idea of advocacy in policy. I feel like so many of us graduate, right? Whether, bachelor's, master's, or even a PhD, and then we start working, like Lee has said, we start doing our 9-to-5 job. How do we start advocating? Do you have any thoughts on, as career professionals, that importance of policy and advocacy and using our skills for the better good?
I have a lot of thoughts about this. Informing policy is one thing, changing policy is an entirely different thing. I've been the beneficiary of actually changing policy in cities and counties. And when you see that happen for the right reasons, based on data and evidence to support making better decisions, that's how I've approached my policy work. I don't consider what I've done in my career as advocacy. I'm concerned about using data to make better decisions. And that's how but I didn't do this early in my career because I didn't know anything. I thought I knew a lot, but I knew nothing. I certainly didn't have the credentials to speak intelligently about anything. And there are a lot of people these days who think they know everything because they read something and they got a degree and I can change the world. The world doesn't work that way. And that's just the way it is. You may want to change certain things, and sometimes you beat your head up against a wall and you marshal as much as you can, and you're not going to win it. But there are battles and there are wars, and sometimes now is not the right time. Maybe in a year and a half, it's the right time. Maybe in 10 years is the right time. So an important thing for people to think about is, why do you want the policy to change? Is it going to improve some sort of outcome or whatever? But it might also hurt people. So policies sometimes have an adverse effect. You are solving one problem, but you could in turn create another problem. And we see that every day with debates in the world. We see it with guns, we see it with bail reform, we see it with voucher, we see it with so many things in our lives. And I think the last 2.5 years, what COVID-19, the killing of George Floyd, and lots of other things that have occurred in our country that we've all seen and lived with, has shown spotlights on certain kinds of things that we need to move the needle on. But I am much more partial to informing policy than anything else. When I've testified on Capitol Hill, a senator who passed away some years ago once told me, Alex, if it has a paper clip or a staple, no one's going to read it in Washington. And it was a really good lesson for me because we live in a world of writing 30-page journal articles that no politician's ever going to read. And so I started doing a lot of op-eds, and I started to figure out how to put my work in ways that people can understand. And I've said this in print, different people need different data in different ways for different reasons, right? So if I walk into a classroom with people who are smart, I can talk to them about statistics like I could talk to this room about this. When I go home and talk to my mom, that is not going to happen. I can't talk to her about regression analysis or anything. It's just not going to happen. So the fact that I can get information and inform the debate, politicians make decisions for reasons that are above my pay grade. Sometimes we look at them and applaud them. Sometimes we look at them and go, what is that? You know, and I think what we want to do is we want to bring science to the table. Not everybody believes in science, which is a problem we have. Not everybody believes in data. I think we've seen that over the last few years. My goal is to provide the best possible data and statistics to inform those kinds of decisions. Especially now in my role, I can't take a policy stance. So it's been somewhat challenging for me because for 26 years I've done that. I worked with a mayor in Miami, in Dallas, changing policy, and in New York, lots of places. So now I have to change how I do that. But when it works, it's rewarding. But don't get into whatever you're doing thinking that you're going to solve this problem today, because I assure you, I'm not saying you're not the only one who has thought about this problem, and you're not the only one who's thought about some solutions in this area. Sometimes the key is getting other people to see that what you're thinking and suggesting is their idea. And sometimes that's, it's a craft to work in the policy world. It's not simple because there are a lot of currents, and everybody wants dollars and everybody wants something from a politician, mostly for the right reasons. So you're going to lose a lot. But hey, we lose a lot.
Yeah, you're trying.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't try, if you raise your hands and just complain about the system, that really is not helpful for me to hear people complain. I don't care about people complaining. I mean, people complain all the time. Offer something better. Offer, okay, tomorrow's a new day. Next week, maybe it's next year. Maybe when the political parties change, whatever it is. I mean, there are windows of opportunities. You have to see the window and be ready for the window when it opens, because it'll shut real quick.
It is definitely this advice that is so helpful to us. I mean, I'm hoping that everyone here, our fellow TERPs, Latinos especially, we're working right now, and your advice is really, I know for me, it's hitting me in things that I'm working this week, and how like I'm reframing some of the work and how, deeper thinking, but also loving what I do and enjoying that as well. So I want to open this up to questions, and then we'll lead you to, if any final remarks that you have or any final thoughts that you would like to share with us. But I think either Andres or I think Andres will be able to help us with questions.
Yeah, of course. And just as a reminder, folks, please feel free to add your questions in the chat. If you'd also like to ask a live question, you can raise your hands using the toolbar on the bottom of your screen. First question we have in the chat, as you reflect on your career here, Dr. Piquero, what was your biggest regret in your career?
Oh, biggest regret. So to be quite honest, my wife and I, we're both academics in the same field, which makes things great and challenging simultaneously. And sometimes, there may have been a decision to leave one institution to go to another, or vice versa, not go to an institution when you could have. And, it affects one person more than the other. That may be one of those. But I also try to learn from those regrets. It's like, oh yeah, that wasn't a good decision. Or it's a lot like making, a new recipe. Oh, well, that didn't turn out good. I guess I'm having a bag of popcorn for dinner. So, when I think about regrets, I don't go, man, my life really sucks or something, because I think everything I've experienced has put me in a position to be where I'm at now. I don't think all of those things, I don't believe in, what I believe in is sometimes things happen to you. Sometimes you make bad decisions. We all make bad decisions. We never make always perfect decisions. So I probably regret that I may have made one or two mistakes along the way, thinking that something might turn out the way it does or should have in my mind, but it didn't. And I'm sure people in this call have done, everybody's dated before. So I'm sure you're like, that was not a good relationship. Move on from that person. So I think that would be it. But, I think looking back, if I had to write my, looking back kind of column, I couldn't have asked for a better professional life and experience. I mean, I've been able to see the world and talk about what I do for a living. I mean, I've gone to the Great Wall of China, I've gone to Israel, I've gone to Australia. I to do these things is a real privilege.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We do have a little bit of a loaded question in the chat. I think it'll be interesting just to hear your perspective on
Sure.
this. So we have someone who's currently a data science master's student, and their question is, one of the most common projects people in my field try to do is predict crime using machine learning tools. From a leadership and researcher standpoint, what are some ethical considerations you think individuals should have when doing this type of work?
Yeah, so I mean, I've used machine learning in my academic research too. And, I say this, I mean, we live in a world of tools and toolboxes, and there's no perfect tool. And every tool is as good as the information and data you put into it. So the more data, the better your tool. Doesn't mean you're going to have perfect prediction. And and this is really what it comes down to for the data scientist question. It's a really good question. Is we live in a world of prediction. And you and me, we predict all the time, all day long, right? When we're driving a car, for those of you've driven on Route 1, right? It's crazy. And the person has a blinker on, and you don't know if they're going to cut you off, if they hit it accidentally, but you're predicting, well, do I have enough time to pass this person? Should I slow down? Should I change the lane? We're living in a world of prediction, right? Hurricane hunters, when they're making predictions about models and when the hurricane hits, it's a prediction. Baseball batters, they're predicting what the pitcher's going to pitch. All of us predict all the time. When it comes to human life, that's where it gets really complicated, right? Because we're trying to balance false positives and false negatives, right? We're going to make incorrect predictions sometimes. And what do people do when they look at GREs or SATs? They're making a prediction based on your score. Are you going to be successful in school? And sometimes they're going to be right. Sometimes they're going to be really, and we're trying to always improve prediction, but remember what we're doing. We're predicting human behavior. And humans don't always follow what we think they're going to do. And so I'm a firm believer of always using, developing, and expanding statistical tools, giving them more and better data. But I also know that that answer is a guesstimate. And it has a confidence interval or a bound around it where we could say, yeah, it's somewhere in here, but you could be wrong. And I think that we should be thinking about tools and algorithms as a piece of information that goes into some overall more holistic answer about whatever penultimate decision you're going to make. I don't think you could summarize whether or not I would have been successful in college by what I sat and took on a 4-hour SAT exam. I've always believed that, and I'll say that to the end of the earth. There's also 4 years of sitting in high school, taking a bunch of classes and quizzes and tests and writing essays. And so there's that balance. I always, we interview people for faculty positions and they give talks about their research, right? There's something about sitting across from someone for 5 minutes and just learning about them. Are they a good person? Will they be a good fit? So all of those things are inputs into decision making. So what we have to be careful of is all of these statistical tools and models, and I'm a big fan of all of them and have written code for them. they are not perfect.
Thank you so much for taking the time to address that question and your insight. A reminder, folks, please feel free to add more questions in the chat. I have my own question, Dr. Piquero. What's next for you following this position, your current position?
I had no idea I was going to be in this position. Right now, since I serve at the pleasure of President Biden, I'm in this position for as long as the president wants me in this position. I'm fortunate enough that the University of Miami gave me a public service leave to return back to the university after my term in office. But I don't know what this door that opened and I jumped into, what that may do thereafter. I'm perfectly fine teaching my classes and doing my research. I'm perfectly fine still doing what I'm doing. I think for me, the book is still open because I also have to weigh my wife's career. And, that's what the hard part of being in a dual career family, especially in academia, is that there's constant opportunities that come around, right? And you always have to listen to opportunities. I mean, it'd be crazy for anybody in this room to never listen to opportunities, whether you're perfectly happy in your life or not. You listen because that's what you should do, because you don't know what you don't know. And I always think about, okay, so what's next? What do I love and what do I want to do? And to be quite honest with you, I just don't know the answer to that question, because I don't know what happens after my term as the director of BJS is up. Obviously I go back to the UM. Hopefully they will still want me back at UM. No, they do want me back at UM. It was very kind of them to obviously to provide that to me. They certainly didn't have to, but it brings them a good visibility in that regard too. I think for me, what I want is I want another challenge. I want another challenge. Challenges are fun. They're fun. I like them.
Thank you for that. And when the president calls, right, you take that opportunity. Other questions, Claudia or Ligia, while we wait for folks in the audience to come up with some new ones?
Yeah, I mean, I can come up with one right now, and then maybe Lisa has one.
I have it's a very short, quick question. So you've mentioned a lot about you're passionate about your career. So what is it that makes you love it so much? Like, what's the area that you think that's always pulling you and like making you keep on going?
I mean, I think about they're puzzles to me. And I like solving puzzles. When you set out to answer a research question, regardless of your field, I test a lot of criminological theories or sociological theories or psychological theories to try to predict some sort of outcome or measure the effect of a policy change on some sort of change in outcomes at the aggregate level, city level, county level, whatever. I'm always curious about the outcome, but what makes me more curious is, what does that outcome now tell me I need to go answer next? And my research program has always been, I somewhat just actually don't care about the answer to this question I'm answering right now. I want to know what the next set of questions that have emerged by that result I just found. So if I find
I think you still
develops, it accumulates over time.
Sorry, Dr. Piquero, do you mind saying that last piece again? You cut off there.
Yeah, so science accumulates. So science accumulates over time. So when you answer one question, if you did it right, it'll generate 3 or 4 more questions. And so your puzzle is being built, but then you're creating a new puzzle. And then what you hope, and what I've seen is my students who I've mentored now start doing those things, and they're answering the questions I couldn't answer. Remember, the data scientists, for example, on this call today, I certainly didn't have the tools you had when I was in grad school in in Lafrac Hall at the University of Maryland campus. I can assure you that that was not the case. And your students 20 years from now will certainly have better computing and better data than you have. We're always trying to improve and learn, better. So that's why the work is never done.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody else has any other question. We're going to be wrapping this up. One of the things that I wanted to ask you is, so you get a chance to really look at statistics and research, right? And from an equity lens. But as we're doing this work, like this equity work and just any type of career, we also focus about us, for us, and by us information, about Latinos, right? Latinos, Latinas, Latinx, and being able to balance that, right? Or how do you work through that? Like, we need a lot of information, and we need research about us, for us, by us.
So it's a perfect way to end our time together. For a long time, I probably would say the first 10, 15 years of my career, I never did anything on race or ethnicity, ever, purposefully. Because I thought, and there's still some people say, oh, there's the Hispanic guy doing research on Hispanic, and of course he's going to find what he finds. Whether or not that's true or not, I believe that. And part of that was also because in criminology, there's so little data on Hispanics and Latinos. I mean, it literally, there's almost nothing because the data were never collected that way. They were collected white, black. And that is what it is. And we're getting better now in that regard. And then I wrote a piece on racial disproportionality, and I had to write it with the word race because only the data that existed to look at that was black and white in prisons. There was no data on Hispanics in prisons in the United States when I wrote that piece. A few years after that, I wrote a piece on immigration and crime, and first one ever that showed that immigrants were less likely to commit crime than native-born Americans. And we released that study, got an immense amount of press. Ann Coulter, who you all may know the name, at least I hope, wrote the most scathing op-ed about me and that research. You can Google it. I mean, it was just mind-boggling. She actually equated immigrants to rotten food in your refrigerator. I mean, her words, not mine. And so I struck a nerve, which is fine. It took me a while to get to that point because I wanted to have an established research program independent of me and my ethnicity. Because then people wouldn't use, oh, well, he doesn't have a really good background, so what does he know what he's doing, right? So I did have that. And I also didn't have a lot of data. So it almost kind of worked out timing-wise where the data started to become available, vis-a-vis myself having, I needed to establish myself. And I don't know if that was self-esteem as much as it was, I got to earn the ability to be on that platform. And the only way I earned the ability to be on that platform is to work my butt off to have the credentials to do that. And so I followed that stream through over the last few years. I've done a lot of work on immigration and crime, not because it's a hot button issue, it really is. And it's going to be for probably the rest of our lifetimes. But it is an issue that is fraught with perception and not data. And that bothers me. And so I think for me as a scientist, whether as a director of BJS or as a criminologist, I want data to help people think about things. You're not going to always change people's minds. Nothing you can do about that. But at least you can put data in their face and say, okay, so what do you have now to counter this? That's where we're at.
Wow. Thank you. You were right. That was the best, one of the best ways to end this. Anything else to add? I know we're very pleasant times.
The only thing I'll add is you have my email. And if people have questions or want to follow up anything, it might take me a day or two to get back to you. But I'm always available and happy to help people who want to know things and at least give you my 2 cents on things. And again, it's just my 2 cents. Just remember that is I've learned from a variety of different people. And I encourage everybody in this room to learn and, sponge it up, sponge it up.
Very cool. Yeah, so as an organization and the board can corroborate in this, we're trying to build our own network, right? Really, like you mentioned it, it's not there, build your own, right?
Absolutely.
And through this process, through the University of Maryland, something that ties us all. We're all Terps.
Absolutely.
Super Terps, we're going to do that. So yeah, definitely we may take you up on that and how to build our network. Anyway, any tips that you may have. So I wanted to thank you again for participating, for sharing your knowledge, all of your experience. A recording of the webinar will be sent to an email to all of those who signed up.
Great.
Also say thank the Career Week sponsors, Tupscard, the American Pacific Mortgage Company. Thank you to the board and everybody else who participated in this and helped out. Dr. Pamela, Lydia, Will, Andres, and everyone else. And thank you.
All right. Mucho gusto. Cuídate todo el mundo.
Gracias.
Gracias. Thank you.
Gracias.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us. We will follow up with an email. Get you that recording. I was gonna confirm around which one of his emails. So recording here.